You hear that? Sounds like your company wanting to be heard. Find out how to leverage your company voice right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show is about finding and activating your company's voice. Joining us are Sarah Huoh, Senior Vice President of Global Communications at Edwards Lifesciences, and Laurie Schalow, Chief Corporate Affairs and Food Safety Officer at Chipotle Mexican Grill. We also have Professor Jessica Kamrath delivering today's leadership lesson. We have a great show for you today, lots to discuss. So let's start things off with our quote of the day. Today's quote comes from branding expert David Breer. If you don't give the market the story to talk about, they'll define your brand story for you. It's now time to introduce our first guest, Sarah Huoh. Sarah leads Edwards' external communications and media strategy to support the company's profile as a leader and innovator in the healthcare and larger business communities. Prior to joining Edwards in 2007, Sarah was a public relations manager for Waste Management, Inc. and a media relations representative for USC Health Sciences and the Weber Shandwick. She has also served as an adjunct professor of public relations at the University of Southern California. Please welcome to the show, Sarah Huoh.
Thank you, Jay. It's nice to see you today. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you on the show. Sarah, please tell us more about what is the role of global communications.
So as you mentioned, I am a leader of global communications on the external communications side for Edwards Lifesciences. We're a medical technology company based in Southern California, and we're very specifically focused on helping patients around the world that are suffering from issues with the structures within their heart, so sort of the doors that open and close to allow blood to flow through the heart and the rest of the body, as well as monitoring technologies for those that are facing serious surgeries or recovering from illnesses. This is our critical care division. And so in my role, I really get a chance to partner with the leaders across the organization around the world, whether it's our executive leadership team or the others that are more focused on the development of our medical technologies and getting those out to patients around the world, and partnering to how do we best further our strategy that's focused on getting these innovations to patients, as well as educate and communicate about what it is that we're doing at Edwards. So what that really means is myself and my team that I work with around the world, we are helping to educate through communications, public relations, social media, as well as our executives and how they present and offer thought leadership on the work that we're doing.
Well, that's great. So a lot of companies, not a lot, just about all companies of size have departments focused on external communications, public relations, global communications. Yes. Why are so many companies investing such a focused effort?
It's a great question, and it's something that we think about a lot in our daily work and what we're doing. It's very important as you think about any of the number of stakeholders that any type of company is engaged with. So again, if I think more specifically about Edwards and the work that I do, we have to always be thinking about the patients that we're serving. That's really a big focus for us, and that's what really drives our work every single day. But alongside that, we have doctors or nurses or others that work in healthcare that are really helping them through their care journeys. We have their family members that are also helping them as they're facing certain health challenges. We have 17,000 employees around the world and a lot of other folks that are interested in coming to work at Edwards, as well as our communities, regulators that we're working with as we're studying our products and getting them approved around the world. And so it's very important that organizations and companies have opportunities to communicate with those different stakeholder groups. And for us and for a lot of other companies, it's how do we make sure that we're communicating our vision and our strategy and really aligned with all of those stakeholders that help us do the daily work that we're doing. We need to make sure that we're consistent in how we're sharing what's happening at the company with all of those different audiences, but giving them the specific information and education that they may need to help align with us in the work that we're doing together.
Now, you're working for a very large organization with a global reach. For somebody thinking about this type of a career path, what type of person tends to fit really well in the public relations, external communications career?
What's really wonderful, I think, about career pathways in public relations, communications, external communications, is it welcomes a lot of different types of backgrounds, educations, diverse interests, personalities, characteristics. And so what I always find kind of funny is, by nature, I'm an introvert. And when I talk to people about the fact that I am involved in external communications and public relations, it maybe doesn't match up, because I think stereotypically somebody would think somebody that's in that line of work maybe has more extroverted tendencies, because you are spending a lot of time engaging with other people, communicating, talking, writing, et cetera. But what I've come to find is that there are some inherent characteristics of those that maybe have more introverted tendencies, like myself, that are beneficial in this type of career pathway. And so being very thoughtful and processing what's happening as far as challenges or opportunities before taking some action, looking to try to bring some order and some calm to certain types of situations that you might be working in. And then really prioritizing the time of your partners that you're working with, whether that's executive leadership at the company or other partners that you're working with, of how am I going to prioritize their time to be most efficient and impactful and effective, and who it is that they're communicating with and engaging with. But of course, I also surround myself with a lot of amazing professionals that work in our communications team that maybe are more extroverts by nature. And I think all of us working together balance each other out, bring different strengths to the team, and it shows that there can just be a really diverse set of characteristics and personalities that can come to this type of career path.
No, that's a great perspective. So, how does a company develop its voice?
It's a great question, and I always take a lot of inspiration and strength from how Edwards Lifesciences has always approached our communication and our engagement with the stakeholders that we work with, because we stay genuine and authentic to who we are as a company. And I think that's what's very important for all companies and organizations. Every single day, our job of all of us, 17,000 people around the world, is how are we going to make sure that the work we do each day is benefiting the patients that we serve, those that can benefit from our medical technologies and help them with their health challenges. And so for us, any sort of communication that we're doing, the voice that we have, really reflects the patient-focused innovation strategy that Edwards has, and our goal every single day of making sure that we are reaching the patients who need the therapies that we have. So that really drives not only our communication strategy, but all strategy of the company. And I think that really helps us to find clarity and focus in the work that we're doing and prioritizing the different opportunities that we might have.
I would imagine that a company's voice needs to have some consistency. But is there also some agility to a company's voice? Does it tend to adapt over time?
It has to at times. And I think if anything of these past couple of years with the global pandemic and other challenges that have come about, it has challenged a lot of companies and organizations to not only continue to stay consistent in how they're communicating and who they're communicating to, but being agile in different moments. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to still continue to be consistent, because it's not good for the company, it's not good for your stakeholders if you're, changing up your voice, changing up your message, changing up your focus every single day. However, you have to be recognizing what's happening in the world around you and acknowledge that, using your focus, your strategy, your mission, or your goal as the way to help bring some clarity to that.
So in your role as global communications, role, you also do a lot of preparation for leaders for their media events. So how do you prepare leaders for these public relations roles?
So I think big picture, where we start is, what is the opportunity? What is the goal of the individual? Are there particular areas of focus or interest that they have in the opportunity that they're engaging in? So whether it's a podcast interview or a traditional media interview or speaking in front of a group, who are they trying to reach? Who is this audience? What do they want to hear from the individual or from Edwards Lifesciences? What is the education opportunity? And how do we make sure that they are getting the information that they're looking for? And then, of course, you get into more of the specific preparations of understanding, are there particular types of messages or information that needs to be shared, and helping to prepare around that. And some of the other more specific pieces of, what does it look like? Just like you and I are here talking, Jay, as far as what does it look like to sit down with Jay, and what does it look like to be in front of the camera and have that type of opportunity. And so helping them feel most comfortable so that they can feel confident and successful in the opportunity that they have.
And from time to time, you might have to also talk about things like topics to avoid, or staying focused on certain kind of messaging. And
it does become a part of the preparation. And so understanding if there are certain interests of the audience that they're working with that could be a little bit different from the main messages that they're looking to share and deliver. And yes, prepare for what other types of questions could you get? Are there other subjects that people may be interested in because something else is happening with the company or happening around the community, and perhaps isn't the area of focus of this particular person, so that they can understand what other questions could come and how they should be prepared to think about those.
I could imagine there were moments sometimes when they may get asked questions that they weren't prepared for, or that something that came that wasn't part of the preparation, and then you hope that it's like you've brought them up and raised them. You hope that they're ready to stand on their own. And
yeah, and I think it's also making sure that the person who's communicating feels comfortable and it's genuine and authentic in the way that they're engaging with whomever it is that they're speaking with, so that they can feel comfortable.
So share with us how the industry is changing. I don't mean the medical industry, but how has the PR field, global communications, external communications, how has that field evolved and changed over the last several years?
Yes, it's changed a lot. When I first was out of college and started working for a PR agency and was working with a variety of clients, it was a little bit more, a defined news cycle. You had defined types of media outlets. So mostly in any of your external communications or media relations work, you were really working with a lot of what I would call just more traditional media, newspapers or radio stations or television stations. And clearly in the last, 10, 20 years, and then even more so in the last several years, you have much more engagement on social media and other types of channels where you have a lot of folks that are interested in different types of topics. So I would say that the opportunities have broadened, but at the same time narrowed, because you have many more channels through social media where you have people that maybe haven't had a traditional journalism career path, but are out producing content and focusing on areas, but many of them have very specific areas that they are looking at and focused on. And so for the communications profession, I think it's both opened up a lot of wonderful opportunities for people to specialize in certain areas that are engaging with, influencers or those in social media alongside traditional media. But at the same time, it means that you have to be much more aware of these types of outlets, that the news cycle isn't, a defined period of time. This is something that you can be getting news at any time of day in any mode that you want. And so it's being mindful of the different types of opportunities that come about, but also who's interested in what's happening with your organization.
So as the industry is changing, and the task of public relations, external relations is changing, what are the skills that need to be developed by professionals in the field?
I think a big piece of pursuing career pathways in communications today continues to really be focused on being curious, being aware, being knowledgeable, and consuming these types of media channels that you may be working with through your work or your organization may be interested in. And so I've always found for myself, and starting back when I was an intern and when I was young in my career, a piece of advice I always give people is consume the media, consume the information that you're interested in sharing about your organization or your company. You need to be educated with who it is that you're working with, and that can also be an inspiration point for ideas of where maybe there's topics that your company or your organization is interested in sharing. Writing is a huge piece of any of the work that's done in communications, whether it's internal communications, external, social media. It takes different forms, but being very proficient in writing and good at that skill set is a standard that I think is across the board, something that's very important. So that is another piece that's very useful for people in this career pathway to be able to utilize. And I think just being open to always learning and gaining new knowledge, being able to absorb that knowledge quickly and be able to apply that, and just being curious about those that are around you, subjects that are of interest to you, because that will really help fuel your interest in your career too.
If you were giving advice to someone, and you will be right now, what advice would you give somebody that wants to have a really successful, thriving career in the communications space? What advice would you give them?
So the biggest advice I always give younger people that are just setting out in this career pathway, whether they're students that are actually looking to study this or newer graduates that are then looking to pursue, is really to learn from everything. So if you're doing an internship, if you're in your first job, or if you're in your first couple of jobs coming out of school, learn from everything it is that you're doing. Take something away from that. Observe. Look at the professionals that you're working with. Look at the organizations that you're a part of. And so a very specific example is one of my tasks when I was an intern during college was at that time compiling news articles and sharing what was happening with the particular clients that we were working with. And so you can imagine for something like that, you could kind of just zone out a little bit and go off because you're making photocopies or you're pulling information off of the internet. But what I would always do is make sure that I would read all of those articles and understand how was the company or organization positioned in there? What was the comment that was made by the company executive or company representative? And sometimes take those questions to the person that I was working with to better understand, how did you prepare for this? Why did you do this? And so really just being curious and asking questions and using that opportunity of being a newer person in the career. There's a lot of power in that, to be able to ask questions and learn from it and understand. And I think the other piece of this too that relates to that is take advantage of those opportunities to really explore, meet people, network, and learn. There's a lot of power in being either a student or a newer professional, because people are going to be happier to say yes and talk with you and share with you. So go out and do informational interviews or reach out to people, whether it's through LinkedIn or through connections that you have, or just trying on your own and seeing if you have a chance to meet somebody and ask them questions about their career and what's been interesting to them. Because I think that's going to tell you not only what you're interested in and what you might want to pursue, but also places that maybe you're not so interested in and you don't want to go down that pathway.
That's great advice for young professionals to follow. I want to thank you for being on the show.
Yes.
And we're going to have you back here in just a few minutes. You're going to join Laurie. We're going to have a panel discussion as well.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
It's now time for a feature segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from Harvard Business Review. The 2022 Edelman Trust Barometer found that there is a demand for more engagement from businesses. People want companies to weigh in on social issues, big or small. This means that a company's stated position or silence can affect customer perceptions of the company and in turn have an impact on business results. It's now time for our Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown is brought to you by PROnTheGo.com. Today we bring you the 8 biggest disasters in public relations history. Number 8. The Four Seasons Total Landscaping Press Conference. Number 7, Come Alive, You're in the Pepsi Generation. Number 6, United Airlines re-accommodate a passenger. Number 5, BP during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Number 4, biggest disaster in public relations history is Nokia's Lumia. Number 3, Bud Light up for whatever debacle. Number 2, Air Force One photo op incident. And the number 1 public relations disaster is the Watergate scandal. Don't go anywhere. We have Laurie Schalow in the studio right after this word from the Center for Leadership. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields, and we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel, and so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Laurie Schalow. Prior to joining Chipotle as the Chief Corporate Affairs and Food Safety Officer, Laurie was Vice President of Public Affairs for Yum Brands, overseeing global corporate social responsibility, PR, crisis management, social listening, and community diversity programs for the 44,000 KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell restaurants in 140 countries. She currently serves on the board of directors for the National Restaurant Association, where she chairs the Advocacy Strategy Committee. Please welcome Laurie Schalow.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on the show to share your ideas around this industry. Could you talk a little bit about your current role?
Sure. As the Chief Corporate Affairs and Food Safety Officer, I oversee the typical public affairs and communications functions. So think of your internal and external communications. I also have oversight of our Cultivate Foundation, our corporate giving programs, sustainability, social listening, and food safety.
So what type of person would be a good fit for this industry?
Yeah, when I think about communications and who might work well, it's an individual who, first, you have to be a good writer. First and foremost, you have to really understand who your audience is, who your constituents are, and also understand the mediums you're using to communicate where they are. So it might be traditional, you might be writing for web copy or social, but that's really critical. And I think just someone who is interested in trends and what people are following, and creativeness helps as well in this role. And also just a little bit of a good gut instinct, I think, from a crisis issues management perspective.
Now, when you talk about the gut instinct, is it about anticipation? Is it about empathy for reactions?
All of the above, Jay. So I think it's being proactive, right? So when I think about my role, everything I do is to protect and promote our brand, our purpose, our employees. And so if you think about that and what the role is, you need to be proactive, right? So that you're anticipating things that could happen. We are a restaurant company. We have 3,200 restaurants, 100,000 employees. So things happen, right, into our restaurants and with our employees. So try to be proactive, but then also when an issue happens, making sure that you are acting with empathy, that you are acting with transparency and authenticity.
Now, earlier, we talked about whether different personalities might be well suited for the PR area. And it seems as though there's a spot for folks from any personality that a person may have. Now, you're a little bit more on the extroverted side, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
So what are the advantages for being extroverted in the PR space?
Well, I think to your point, introverted is great. A lot of times PR professionals, especially on the external communication side and on the internal side, you're behind the camera, right? You're behind the scenes. You're doing a lot of the writing. So that's fine. But also on the external side, if you are the voice of the brand, if you're out doing speaking engagements, if you're doing interviews like we're doing here today. So I think a good mix is important. Either one can work, but as an extrovert, I'll say, to engage with different individuals all across the organization, constituents from government officials to media to reporters. I think that's really helpful as well.
So the industry actually has places for people from all different backgrounds or different personalities, but they all have to be good writers.
Absolutely.
You have to be good writers. So how does a company develop its voice?
Well, I think it's helpful for a brand like Chipotle if you're founded on a purpose, right? So if you have your purpose, ours is to cultivate a better world, which is really important to us, and we can bring that to life in our communications. But I think no matter what your company is or your brand or what you're promoting, it has to be true and authentic to your purpose, your values, your position that you want consumers to think about, right? So how you might bring that to life is through interviews when we're talking. I just shared with you our purpose, right? So now I've shared with all the viewers what the purpose is. And I try to make sure that when any of our executives are speaking or employees are speaking, that we're building in those messages about our brand voice and what we want others to take away into whatever interview they're doing. So I think that's really important. But then also put it through a 360 lens of your advertising, your social, speaking engagements, your reporting. So whatever you're doing is making sure that you're bringing that brand voice to life in everything, and then you'll start to see and develop that from consumers reporting it back to you.
So it's important that the way to make sure that we have a company voice is we have to activate that voice, and we have to repetition is not the right word, but consistency maybe is a better way of describing it. So every time we have a spot where we're in the public eye, there's an opportunity.
Absolutely. So there's paid and earned ways, right? So you can promote that through your paid advertising on your websites and your reports that you do. But then, when you're out publicly speaking or you're doing interviews, you also have an opportunity while you have the microphone, if you will, to share that and let others know what you want to tell them.
So when I talk about the Center for Leadership, and I describe that we're about three things: we connect, we develop, and we serve. This is part of that messaging, and it's an important part of really every conversation I might have.
You just did it. Very well done.
Terrific. So let's talk a little bit about media training and the role that public relations plays in preparing leaders to represent their companies.
Sure, absolutely critically important. So I think as a communications person, you need to make sure that whoever you are putting forth into the public or who are speaking externally, that they have been trained and they understand what they should say and what they should not say, what questions to answer, what not to answer. And preparing them for that position is critically important. So what my team does a lot is prepare, we call them briefing documents. Different companies call them different things. But it's actually a document that tells you who you're speaking to, what the topic is, what you should be prepared to speak about. We also provide links to past interviews that reporter has done so you can watch those. And then give you different Q&A that the reporter might ask you during that interview so that you are very well prepared. And then those key messages, again, that I mentioned, so you want to have those that you can weave throughout the conversation. Cultivating a better world should come up somewhere in the interview, and naturally and organically doing that. And then if it's someone who is newer to speaking and doing interviews, we'll do some hardcore media training in advance, but also just some role playing and making sure they're comfortable before the day of.
So sometimes part of that preparation is not just thinking about our message, but also thinking about who the conversation will be with, and maybe even figuring to some extent what their objectives may be or what their past kinds of approaches to these types of interviews?
Absolutely. I think from the external side, when you're doing an interview, the reporter always has an angle or a message that they want to get across, like we're doing today, right, around communications and having a voice and how do you deliver that. So, understanding what that angle is, and it may be something that your company doesn't want to talk as much about if you think about crisis and issues, interviews. So just making sure that you understand, we call it bridging, that you might want to answer the question in a way that is answering it, but also leading into a different topic that you want to talk about. So you bridge to something else.
That's great. So the industry is changing, the PR industry. It's changed through the years. Mm-hmm. How do you see it continuing to change?
I think social media has changed the game. I'll date myself here, but it used to be a 24-hour news cycle. It really did. You would issue a press release at night, and you would wait until the next morning when you'd open your newspaper, and here it is, and it's on the Today Show in the morning. But now it's 24 seconds. I say it went from 24 hours to 24 seconds. It's as long as it takes someone to type 280 characters, right? And then that becomes news. Anyone with a smartphone is now a reporter. And reporters aren't the traditional reporters that they used to be. So I think that it has changed the way that we have to deliver our news and also monitor the news. So we have a social listening team that's part of my group that we are monitoring what's being said about our brand and making sure that it is accurate and we can provide any corrections that are needed.
It's interesting, in the past, it was you put out messages and hope or maybe it'll get picked up, or hopefully it'll get picked up. But now, in a way, you're putting out messages and the whole world can just see it or grab it at any instance.
Yeah, I always say, social media is a blessing and a curse, right? So it's a blessing that we now have an avenue to very quickly get our news out to millions and millions of people, right? You can get eyeballs and likes and shares and that happening very instantly, which is a good thing if you're trying to promote something proactive or a product that you want people to know about. It also can be a bad thing. If it's a negative issue or a brand reputational risk that you would prefer not to be shared, it also goes instant.
But that puts a lot of pressure on folks in your type of role, because things that you spend 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years building and growing and developing and reinforcing, if in the wrong hands for not a very long period of time, it could get unglued.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that brand reputation. Actually, my title used to be corporate reputation officer, because it's so critically important that we protect that image. We work so hard. I mean, I think about our founder who founded Chipotle 30 years ago, and the brand and the image that was built and all the hard work that was done, and it can very instantly be taken away.
So what skills do you see the new PR professionals needing to really hone in?
I think that you need to be social savvy, right? I think that you have to understand all the different mediums that constituents are using and how they're getting your news. You have to be where they are, right? So I don't think you can just write press releases anymore, maybe write some web copy or, talk internally even to your internal, communications through employees, that, you now have to have apps and video messaging and digital menu boards and different things to reach your audiences. So that requires a little bit of a different skill from, I'd say, traditional communications professionals. And then also just being up to trends, staying current with what's relevant. How do you associate your brand or the products that you're promoting and talking about with that right audience, right? So it's I think a different lens than it used to be, and probably hopefully in school when people are taking courses in that in communications and journalism, that they are teaching those differences.
And it's a process, though. It's a learning process that never really ends, does it?
Nope. It's constant, but that's what makes it so fun, and you have that creative side of communications as well.
So what advice would you give somebody just starting out, or somebody that aspires to be in a role such as yours, early career? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, the advice I always say is, raise your hand for those projects that nobody wants. Take those assignments that, nobody wants to do, because it's your opportunity to really shine, right? And so I think that's how you get noticed. Also, I always tell people, if you sit and wait for those projects to come to you or those opportunities to come to you, you might be sitting a long time. So go seek out opportunities. Everybody has a boss, right? So look at the work that your boss is doing and say, hey, why don't I take a stab at writing that press release? Why don't I work on that PowerPoint for you? And eventually you become the person doing that work, and that is how you grow and get promoted within your career. So I think just, take risks, be creative, don't be afraid to ask questions, but learn from, mistakes and learn from your actions. Maybe something worked really well, repeat that. If it didn't, learn from it and try to make some changes going forward.
So even in your own career path, you can be entrepreneurial even in your own growth.
Absolutely, and that's what's great about communications, right? It's that voice that we're creating. We create voices not only for the brand, for Chipotle and all of our products, but also for our CEO and for our leadership team. So you have that creativity to build that into communications, and that voice comes to life through others. So it's really fun.
And our show's not about this, but in a way, there's also, as a professional, you're creating your own.
That's right.
Your own voice on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Laurie, for being on the show. And we're going to have you back here in just a few minutes as we do our panel discussion when Sarah rejoins us.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jay. Very fun.
It's now time for our leadership example. Today's leadership example comes from simplicable.com. Here are 25 examples of corporate communication. It's now time for today's leadership lesson, being delivered by Dr. Jessica Kamrath, Professor in Human Communications. Take it away, Dr. Kamrath.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Kamrath, and here's today's leadership lesson. Today, I will be talking about discursive leadership, specifically using linguistic tools to generate powerful requests and avoid linguistic viruses. So what is discourse and how does it drive communication actions and behaviors? According to Dr. Gail Fairhurst, discourse is a system of thought that is anchored in time, giving us a linguistic tool bag for how to think, behave, act, and speak. As leaders, we are both constrained and disciplined by discourses and the tools we have access to. For example, if we only subscribe to the tenets of democratic or autocratic leadership styles, these styles may enable us to succeed in one situational context while constraining us in another. Additionally, communication processes are directly tied to action. Framing is about selecting one particular meaning over another. Different frames, then, are directly tied to different actions. As a leader, it's important to be aware of how we create meaning based on a given context and how that constrains and enables our opportunities for action. We can shift the context and what we make it mean to enable us to have multiple opportunities for action. Every situation we deal with shows up for us in some context or another, even when we're not aware of it. A context functions as a powerful filter through which we see the world, others, ourselves, and highlights some aspects while dimming out other aspects. For example, if our context for dealing with others is people can't be trusted, we're likely to question any evidence that the person we are dealing with can be trusted, even when they're attempting to be fair. In order to deal with this context, we are likely to be defensive, constraining our ability to lead. Context has the power to shape your way of being and the actions you take. Doctors Matthew Budd and Larry Rothstein argue that language makes possible coordinating with others and the building of satisfying, trusting relationships. Leaders need to build linguistic awareness and competence to effectively and impactfully lead. Requests are a linguistic action you take when you seek the assistance of another in satisfying an underlying concern. Linguistic viruses are breakdowns in these actions, attack relationships, and cause dissatisfaction. Not making a request is out of fear of asking others for something, feeling rejected, or being afraid others may see us as incompetent. A request, however, simply invites another person to participate in your life. And as a leader, we need relevant parties to lead. In sum, linguistic viruses create ineffectiveness and friction between people. If you want to use language powerfully and impactfully to activate your voice as a leader and set up the possibility for mutual satisfaction, we must build an awareness of our behavior in the linguistic domain. Please remember to be kind humans to yourselves and others. Thank you. I'm Jessica Kamrath, and this has been today's Leadership Lesson.
Thank you, Professor Kamrath, for that insightful leadership lesson. We brought back our two guests for today's leadership panel. Thank you, Laurie and Sarah, for rejoining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the way that the leadership panel works is I'll ask a question, you'll both have a chance to answer it. The first question will be for Sarah. How has technology changed global communications in your industry?
Well, technology has really changed a lot of aspects of what we do from a communications, public relations, and media relations perspective, both from the sense of how we as a company communicate, because we have a lot more platforms and channels that we can use to get to more specific stakeholder audiences. So if we want to share information with people that are interested in working at Edwards Lifesciences, we have ways to give them opportunities to glimpse into what's happening at the company and what opportunities that they might have. But it also gives us a chance to know some of our stakeholder audiences better too. So for instance, the journalists that we work with in the ongoing course of our work at Edwards that are interested in healthcare news or medical news, we can better understand what's of interest to them, what they're writing about, what they're exploring. They may give us a little bit of a glimpse into their work and their daily life as well. And so it gives us a chance to be a little bit better educated and understand how to better connect with them too.
Okay, so same question for you, Laurie.
Yeah, I think technology certainly has changed, over the years and continues to evolve even today. And so the way that we've communicated, the means we use, but also I think the insight it gives us is really important. And as we're thinking about communicating with the different audiences, we now have so much more data and, where should we be focusing? What words, what messages are resonating? So I think that that's been really important to us as well.
So technology gives us the opportunity to have answers to questions at a speed that we've just never really had before.
I think speed is the key, right? So it used to be you have to wait a long time, and now it's it's right at your fingertips as quickly as you gather that data.
Yeah, I could imagine, if we date back to a press release and we say, how do people react to it? How do we gauge how well it was received? Whereas now it's much easier to know.
Yeah, it's much more instantaneous. And what's interesting is it's really changed the work of a journalist too, because traditionally they may be, if they're writing for a newspaper, they're going to work on their story during the day and then it's going to publish the next day, or if at that point in time they did have it online, it's going to go up later in the day. At this point in time, they could put out something very quickly on Twitter or on LinkedIn and then follow up with something much more extensive. So there's a lot more feedback coming very quickly, which can be very helpful, and it's also sometimes situations that you need to react to much more quickly.
All right, so our second question, and we'll have Laurie answer this one first. How do you leverage social media at Chipotle?
I think social media has really helped us with that two-way communication, right? So if I think about traditional ways of communicating or even advertising, you put a message out and then you hope to do some maybe follow-up research and get that. But social media is instantaneously, right? You can comment, you can share, you can respond. We can leverage influencers. So using social media to help amplify our brand has really helped us. Now that's a double-edged sword, right? So when you have positive news to share, it's a great thing that you can get instant, impressions and spread the word. But maybe when it's something you don't want to share or something that's happening around your brand that is now on social media, it also spreads like wildfire. So you have to balance that, but also know how to quickly respond.
Yeah, Sarah, same question for Edwards.
So for Edwards Lifesciences, it's pretty unique as you think about the landscape of social media. We're a highly regulated company. We work in medical products and the healthcare space, and so we have certain rules that we have to abide by that maybe other types of organizations or companies don't need to, as well as being a publicly traded company, so that governs a lot of the way that you interact with the stakeholders that you have. But what we found, it's very similar to what Laurie's talking about, is we found that it's an additional channel that we can use to communicate with different audiences and stakeholders that maybe prefer to receive information that way. And for us, it's also provided an interesting opportunity where, call it, you can kind of fill in the blanks between press releases. So maybe there's certain information or perspective or company voice that you want to share that doesn't exactly fit into the mode of doing a traditional press release, but it's something you'd like to be able to share with those audiences. And so you can do something brief on social media or link to a longer piece that maybe you've published on the company website. And so that's given us a lot more flexibility to be able to share some of that information in a less, call it, formal way, but could be still interesting to our employees or others out there that would like to see it there.
Yeah, it's almost as if in the past we had to say, is this newsworthy? Mm-hmm. Whereas now you can create these small wins, these small messages that can accumulate.
Yes, and also too, given that a lot of the platforms are visually driven, you can share information. For us, we get a lot of excitement and energy out of the patients that we serve and help. And so there's oftentimes throughout the year where we'll have folks coming to visit us and talk about how the medical therapy that Edwards developed, whether it's a heart valve or something else, has helped them. And we can share pictures or video or the elements of that, of the teams meeting each other, and you get the emotion, the excitement that we feel off of that through that platform too. And
I'll add, I know we talk a lot about external and sharing that with consumers and constituents, but also internal. Internal communications is so important, and using social. Gone are the days that anyone's going to read a very long email. So they want a quick read, whether it's a text message or using social posts, sharing through chats. That's critically important to get quick messages out to your internal audiences too.
In this role, you probably see a lot of things, great and not so great. So our next question is actually about wisdom and learning from mistakes. So please, each of you share, and Laurie, you'll go first. Please share a PR mistake, whether it was yours or not, what was learned, and how can we all learn from this?
Of course, I have to go first, right? No,
yes,
so
you get to
I'll
go
share.
First.
Working for Chipotle, we're a food company, and it's no secret that we had some food safety issues back in 2015 and 2016. And the lesson learned was when that happened to the brand went silent, right? There was something negative was happening. And so instead of PR 101, right? What happened? What are you doing about it? And what are you doing to make sure it never happens again? Those are the three critical things for communications when there's a crisis. And so when the brand goes silent, people are left to make up their own decisions and start their own storylines around things, right? So I think it's critically important that when an issue happens, you need to be very quick to respond and using the same medium that people are sharing that news. So it might be social, it might be traditional, you just never know. But that was the lesson learned for us, is that when something happens to your brand that really damages your reputation on a national or even a global scale, you have to respond quickly and be authentic and transparent.
You can't be quiet and hope it will go away.
Yeah. You can still hope that there's other breaking news that might push your story down, but you do have to own it. And I think that consumers will give you credit and hopefully recover a little more quickly when you do so.
Okay, terrific. Now, Sarah,
now I'm in the
it's your turn. I know there's never been a mistake, but what PR mistake can you reflect on that we all could learn from?
It's a good question, and I have to say we have a piece of our culture at Edwards that's own your failures, learn. And so certainly something I thought about and have learned from. I was reflecting back on my earlier time at Edwards, newer to my job, very eager to make an impact, demonstrate, some of the work that PR and communications could do to really help support our clinical trials and our product development and what was happening with our therapies. And so I was very excited to be interfacing with a reporter and talking about a clinical trial with one of our promising new therapies. And my mistake that I made is I didn't think about the other stakeholders that could be involved in that. And so in my eagerness to be engaged with the reporter and talk about what was going on, and then a story publishes, for me, I'm thinking about this is a win, this is exciting for talking about a new therapy we have for patients. But I neglected to think about that there's multiple clinical trial sites in that region. There could be, some competition amongst those hospitals, and they might like to have an opportunity to engage and have a say. And so what for me initially felt like a win really quickly turned to a learning experience to realize you need to slow down sometimes. You need to just take a breath and think about who are the stakeholders that this is going to impact and matter to. In this case, it was external partners at hospitals that I'm going to be working with on a regular basis through the development of these therapies. But I think it's also as important as thinking about your internal partners and who are you interfacing with, who needs to know what's going on, who needs to understand your plans. So just kind of slow down a bit and think about things before you jump out and get excited and engage.
And sometimes it's not just about us.
Yes.
But it's our partnerships and our community.
Yeah, that's such a good lesson, right? And so you think about everything you say, and that's why sometimes you'll want to have multiple people reviewing a statement or a quote or what you're saying, because there are some unintended consequences that maybe you didn't think about in your seat that affect your business or others.
Absolutely.
So that's a great lesson.
So our next question, and Sarah's going to have a chance to answer this one first. What have you learned during your career that you wish you had learned much earlier?
So, and it sort of maybe ties a little bit to the example I shared on the lesson learned in public relations, communications, media relations. There's a lot of excitement when you get your product or your company or your client, on the front page or in a big news broadcast, and that's very exciting. But what I've learned too is that there's a lot of power in that more personalized communication, the more, smaller scale connections and direct engagement that can oftentimes happen in the types of roles that we have when we're working with our leaders at our companies or others throughout the company. So that power in that individual connection and the ability to have very specialized, tailored engagement, because sometimes a lot of impact and power for the work that you're trying to do and the mission that you have as an organization can come from those more specific encounters and specific relationships. So always just being thoughtful about, it doesn't always have to be a mass communication. It doesn't always have to be, trying to go for scale with the work that you're doing in this role. Oftentimes there's a lot of impact that can come from really just being thoughtful about who is it that we're engaged with, who really understands what we're doing and could be impacted by what we're doing, and are there individuals that, whether it's our leaders or ourselves, could really be forming relationships with that could have some power in the mission of what we're trying to achieve.
And so it's almost like this development of an external empathy for all of the opportunities that are out there.
And really just being aware of, your stakeholder groups and your environments and your communities, and where are there opportunities where you can form some of those relationships that are going to be very meaningful and help to achieve mutual goals that you have, in our instance, to try to impact patients around the world, and other companies and organizations trying to make other impacts as well.
Thank you. So Laurie, it's your turn. What have you learned during your career that you wish you had learned earlier?
I think I wish I would have understood the importance of your own personal brand as much as, the brand that you're communicating or talking about, because I always tell people, have that confidence, take that seat at the table, raise your hand, ask the question, come prepared. But it's really important as I look across the organization and think about individuals in communications within Chipotle and externally, is that what stands out about you, right? That's your personal brand, and how critically important that is to everything you're going to do, whether you're promoted within the company or assignments you might, get, or different things you're going to be working on. So, just be confident, and not in an overly confident way, but, be humble, but be confident and take that seat, take that opportunity.
Thank you, Laurie. So we're now at a really exciting part of the show. This is time for our final word.
So I thought of this quote for today because I use it in almost every presentation, any talk I give on PR. And it's a Warren Buffett quote from a few years ago. And he said that it takes 20 years to build a brand reputation, and it only takes 5 minutes to ruin it. I'll argue it takes 5 seconds these days, with a tweet or a social post. And if you think about that, you'll do things differently. And I love that quote because, we talked a little bit about this today on the show, that, we work so hard to build that brand reputation and make sure everything's perfect, and we're talking to the right consumers and we're using the right words. but then something can happen and you can instantly set yourself back those 20 years. But I'd also argue that so being proactive and making sure something doesn't happen, but how you act in the moment, how you communicate, who's talking, what words you're using, how transparent are you, how authentic are you, is going to determine of how long and how far back you set yourself on that reputational risk.
Thank you, Laurie. What about you, Sarah?
I love what Laurie has to say, but I'll go maybe a little different direction of kind of the career and the opportunities here. And I think just by virtue of the fact, Jay, that you have Laurie and I here representing two very different types of companies and organizations, two different types of career pathways and styles, is an emphasis that communications, public relations can really be a great career path for a lot of different types of individuals from diverse backgrounds, from diverse interests. And so the energy that I take out of the career that I have is I get a chance every single day to work with amazing individuals, not only within Edwards Lifesciences, but around the industry. So getting a chance to meet people like Laurie and learn from them, and get a chance to work with people all around me that are incredibly smart, passionate, and engaged individuals. And I have the privilege to be able to educate about the work that they're doing, share about the work that they're doing, and the impact that we're having. And so I would just encourage anybody who might be tuning in to watch this show to learn a little bit more about careers in public relations or communications, to understand that you can take all different types of pathways, you can work in all kinds of industries, and really no matter what your interest or passion is, if you have that engagement to really be out there to educate and inform about what's happening, there's likely a spot for you somewhere that you could pursue. And it's a really fulfilling career and something that's brought me tremendous joy and engagement. But I look around the team around me as well and see the same for the colleagues that I get a chance to work with each day.
And there you have our final word. Thank you, Sarah and Laurie, for joining us on today's show.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUF_CFL. So that's our story, and we're sticking to it. Now to the boilerplate. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Thank you to our featured guests, Sarah Huoh and Laurie Schalow, as well as Professor Jessica Kamrath for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice, where your leadership development is our greatest joy. I'm Jay Barbuto here at the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton. We'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.